She stood at the precipice of unimaginable wealth, every diamond, every crown within her grasp. Yet, her heart yearned for something money couldn't buy: true love. This is the unheard story of an Alpha King's test, where a woman's choice reveals the true nature of his reign and whether their connection was forged in gold or pure devotion. The sun hung low over the kingdom, a molten orb spilling gold across the marble floors of the royal hall. Every corridor, every carved column, whispered of conquest and authority, the legacy of a man who had built an empire not merely with steel, but with a mind sharper than the finest blade. He was the Alpha King, and yet as he stood there gazing out over his domain, a rare uncertainty pressed against his chest, a force he could not quell with armies, councils, or edicts. The heart of the kingdom had never been so quiet, yet within its silence, a storm roiled. Today was no ordinary day. Today, he would see whether the one he cherished, the woman whose presence stirred something ungovernable in him, would choose the path he had carved for her, or one carved by her own hand. Her name alone could undo him if he allowed it. She moved through the corridors of the palace like sunlight, brushing the cold stone with warmth and life. Her laughter, delicate yet certain, had a way of reminding the king of a truth he often buried beneath layers of duty: that no throne, no crown, no empire could outweigh the gravity of a human heart. Yet this test was necessary. The Alpha King had conquered continents, quelled rebellions, and outwitted kings who dared challenge him. But power over people was not the same as power over hearts. Hearts could betray even the wisest rulers, and he was determined, relentlessly determined, that Adele's choice would be made freely, without the shadows of fear or obligation. The council chamber was vast, its ceilings towering, its tapestries chronicling victories that spanned decades. Every noble, advisor, and general waited with the precision of a well-oiled machine, their eyes flicking between the Alpha King and Adele, sensing the tension but unable to discern its source. They did not know that today's event was a test not of allegiance, but of love. Adele entered, her dress a soft cascade of silver and blue that caught the dying light. Her eyes, dark as polished onyx, held neither fear nor uncertainty, only a quiet resolve. She paused, acknowledging the council with a nod that was both polite and commanding, a reminder that her influence, subtle as it was, extended beyond the king's own will. "Your Majesty," she said, her voice steady, "you have asked for my decision." He inclined his head, his fingers brushing the edge of the marble dais, grounding himself in the weight of expectation. "I have," he said, his tone calm, though beneath it surged a current of vulnerability rarely glimpsed by those who served him. "And I trust it will be guided by wisdom." Adele's lips pressed into a line, her fingers brushing the hem of her gown as if steadying herself for what she was about to do. "I have considered the life you offer me: wealth, influence, a place in history alongside you. I have weighed it against what I feel, against the truth that resides in my own heart. And I have made my choice." The hall fell silent. Even the wind outside seemed to pause, as if listening. "I choose love," she said, her voice soft but unyielding. "Not riches, not power, not the safety of legacy. I choose the freedom to stand with you, not beneath you, not for convenience or obligation, but because my heart compels me." The words landed like a hammer strike. The Alpha King, so accustomed to obedience, to the unquestioning submission of allies and vassals, felt a tremor of disbelief. For a moment, he saw the world not as a chessboard of strategy and conquest, but as a fragile glass sphere, beautiful, dangerous, and entirely at her mercy. Shock flashed across the council members' faces, quickly masked by hurried murmurs and suppressed gasps. This was unprecedented. No royal bride had ever defied the king's will so openly, so completely. And yet, in that audacious choice, there was an undeniable truth that began to settle in the Alpha King's chest, a truth he had long ignored beneath layers of armor, that the greatest power might not lie in domination, but in surrender to what truly mattered. He stepped forward, closing the distance between them. His presence a tidal wave of authority and unspoken emotion. "You choose me, not the throne," he said, voice roughened by both surprise and awe. "You understand that this choice could cost you everything. The kingdom, the safety of your name, the favor of every hand that serves me." Adele met his gaze, unflinching. "I understand," she said. "And I accept it. Because there is no crown, no title, no fortune that can compare to the honesty of love, to the courage of living authentically, to the chance to be truly seen and chosen." The Alpha King's hands clenched at his sides, the weight of his legacy pressing down on him. Every instinct screamed to correct, to command, to bend reality to his will. And yet, as he looked at her, the fire in her eyes, the certainty in her posture, he realized that his greatest conquest might not be of lands or men, but of himself. Around them, the courtiers began to murmur again, some in admiration, others in horror. But the Alpha King barely noticed. He only noticed Adele, the woman who had dared to defy the entire structure of his life with a single declaration of truth. In that chamber, in that fleeting moment between defiance and acceptance, the first seeds of a new kind of reign were sown. One not ruled solely by power or gold, but by understanding, respect, and the audacity to place love above all else. The test had begun. And the Alpha King, for the first time in his storied life, felt a thrill more intoxicating than victory. The thrill of uncertainty, of vulnerability, and of the raw, unbreakable strength that comes when hearts, not thrones, are at stake. The sun had barely risen when Adele wandered through the palace gardens, the dew clinging to the emerald leaves like tiny diamonds. The scent of jasmine and rose hung in the cool morning air, intoxicating in its simplicity, in contrast to the opulence she had been offered. She walked along the winding paths, her mind replaying the events of the day before, the whispers, the astonished stares, the shock that had rippled through the court. Every step felt heavier with the weight of expectation. Not from the kingdom, though that was vast enough, but from herself. For years she had been groomed, tutored, and admired for her intellect, her grace, her ability to maneuver in a world dominated by men who measured worth in titles, lands, and coin. And yet, the choice she had made was antithetical to all of it. A life of comfort and influence had been laid at her feet. Gold, jewels, land stretching beyond sight, the allegiance of countless loyal subjects. It had all been hers for the mere act of compliance. Marry the king, and her name would shine in history books, her power unquestioned. But compliance had never been her way. She had long known that a life dictated by obligation was a gilded cage, and she could not live behind bars that glittered as brightly as the sun. Yet as she walked, the garden's serenity offered no comfort. Every petal and leaf seemed to echo the enormity of her decision. How would the court respond? How would the king truly react? Love was a precarious thing, beautiful, yes, but also fragile, vulnerable to betrayal, to disappointment, to the politics and pressures that had shaped the very kingdom they inhabited. Adele paused near a fountain, its waters reflecting the morning light in endless ripples. She touched the smooth marble edge, her fingers trembling slightly, and allowed herself to remember the conversation she had had with the king. The raw intensity in his eyes, the mixture of disbelief and something that had bordered on awe, it had unsettled her, made her heart pound with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. He had asked if she understood the consequences of her choice, and she had fully. This decision was not merely about her heart. It was about the subtle rebellion she had undertaken against an entire system built on fear, loyalty, and material gain. To choose love over legacy was to risk scandal, disfavor, and perhaps even resentment from those who believed that power must always be preserved above personal truth. A soft rustle of leaves drew her attention. It was Alfra, the king, approaching with his usual measured grace. He stopped a few paces away, hands clasped behind his back, studying her with an intensity that made her stomach tighten. "You seem contemplative this morning," he said, voice low but carrying the weight of command. Adele lifted her gaze, meeting his. "I am," she admitted. "Decisions such as these are rarely so simple as a heartbeat's resolve." Alfra inclined his head, eyes narrowing slightly. "You understand, then, that the world will not forgive this choice easily. The council, the advisors, the nobles, they expect compliance. They expect a queen who accepts her role without question." "I understand," she said softly, her voice unwavering. "And yet, I have never believed in blind obedience. My loyalty is not to wealth, to power, or to tradition. It is to truth. And to the man I choose to stand beside." For a moment, Alfra said nothing. The breeze rustled the leaves above them, and the quiet tension between them was nearly palpable. He had faced countless challenges, wars, treachery, betrayals, but nothing had ever shaken him like this. Her defiance was not reckless. It was deliberate, considered, and utterly fearless. "You have refused a life of unparalleled comfort," he said finally, a note of admiration threading through his words. "A life that would have made you untouchable, the envy of every noble and monarch in the known world." "I am not untouched by the world," Adele replied, stepping closer. "But untouchable does not equate to fulfilled. I would rather face the unknown with honesty than live a lie wrapped in gold and velvet." Her words hung between them, resonating with a clarity that pierced the morning air. Alfra felt the stirrings of something new within him. The recognition that a true queen's power might lie not in her ability to comply, but in her ability to choose. And choose she had. Word of Adele's decision traveled quickly through the palace corridors. Whispers became discussions, discussions became debates, and debates reached the ears of the most influential members of the court. Some were scandalized. "How dare she deny the king?" they whispered behind closed doors. Others were quietly impressed. "She is brave," they admitted. "Courageous beyond measure." The council convened in urgent sessions. Advisors fretted over alliances that might be jeopardized, over the perception of weakness in a ruler whose bride refused his offer. Nobles discussed the implications for succession, for influence, for centuries of carefully maintained tradition. Yet none of these concerns reached Adele. She moved through the palace with a quiet certainty, aware that her choice had shifted something fundamental in the kingdom, a subtle realignment of power from gold and privilege to courage and conviction. In her private moments, however, Adele questioned herself. Would love endure when every eye in the kingdom scrutinized them? Would her heart remain steadfast when the court whispered and plotted, when tradition clawed at the edges of their lives? These doubts were natural, human, and she allowed herself to feel them, to acknowledge them without fear. Alfred, too, grappled with the implications. The initial shock of her refusal had subsided, replaced by a simmering respect and an understanding he had not anticipated. A true alpha, he realized, did not command compliance from the hearts of others. He earned it. And Adele's choice had reminded him of a profound truth. The strongest bonds were forged not from obligation, but from mutual respect and genuine devotion. Later, in the quiet of his study, he examined the chain of consequences her decision might unleash. The kingdom would murmur, alliances might falter, traditions would be questioned. And yet, for the first time in decades, he felt an unfamiliar liberation, a sense that leadership could be more than strategy, that influence could be rooted in integrity rather than fear. When he found Adele again, she was sitting by the great window overlooking the sprawling gardens, sunlight washing her features in gold and rose hues. She looked at him with calm expectation, as if she already knew that the ripples of her choice would extend far beyond the palace walls. "You have changed the game," he said, his voice carrying both admiration and something softer, more personal. "Not just for me but for every person in this kingdom. You've shown them another way, a way that doesn't bow to convention or fear." Adele smiled faintly. "Perhaps," she said. "Or perhaps I've simply chosen what is right for me. The rest will follow or not as it will." And indeed it did. The courtiers whispered, the public speculated, and slowly, a subtle shift began. People watched a queen who had dared to reject gold and privilege for love. Some called it folly. Others, the bravest act they had ever witnessed. And through it all, Adele remained steadfast. Her presence a quiet challenge to every rigid expectation that had long defined the kingdom. Alfra stood beside her then, a silent guardian and witness to her courage. He understood finally that the ultimate test was not in her compliance, but in her choice, and in his ability to honor it. The Alpha King had faced armies, treachery, and centuries of tradition. But this was a challenge unlike any other. To lead, to protect, and to love, without coercion, without force, was the truest test of his reign. And Adele had chosen to teach him that lesson with grace, audacity, and a heart unbound by riches. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the council chamber, casting long, angular shadows across the marble floors. Alfra, the Alpha King, stood at the center of the room, his usual composure tempered by the storm that raged beneath the surface of his calm demeanor. The echoes of Adele's choice, love over legacy, heart over riches, still reverberated through his mind, refusing to settle into the neat compartments of strategy and control that he had so long relied upon. For a lifetime, Alfra had wielded power like a blade, precise and unwavering. He had conquered rivals, quelled uprisings, and expanded his empire with the meticulous care of a master tactician. To challenge him in battle was unthinkable, to challenge his will, inconceivable. And yet, here she was, the queen he had chosen, the woman whose presence had stirred his heart and unsettled his soul, standing against the expectations of history, family, and tradition, and daring to chart her own course. His first reaction had been disbelief. His chest had tightened as if the very air had been stolen from him. A king unchallenged, a man who had shaped the world around him, now faced something infinitely more unpredictable: a woman's will. Alfra paced the chamber, his boots ringing against the cold stone, each step a counterpoint to the turmoil in his mind. He had been taught that power was to be demanded, influence commanded, and yet Adele had reminded him that the most enduring authority was earned, not seized. The council, oblivious to the intricacies of his internal struggle, awaited his command. Their murmurs filled the air, a subtle hum of anxiety and judgment. Alfra's advisors, men who had long relied on his decisiveness, glanced nervously between each other, unsure how to respond to the unprecedented act of defiance. Some whispered about scandal, others about threat, and a few, rare, perceptive few, recognized the quiet courage in her choice. Alfra finally stopped at the center of the dais, his hands resting on the carved edge as he looked across the room. "You are all aware of Adele's decision," he said, voice steady but imbued with an intensity that silenced the chamber instantly. "She has declined the life of comfort, influence, and security that he gestured vaguely at the gathered nobles, have long considered the ultimate prize." A ripple of astonishment spread through the room. Eyes widened, breaths held, the weight of audacity pressing against the centuries of expectation that had long dictated every aspect of royal life. Alfra's gaze remained fixed on Adele, who had taken her place beside him with a quiet dignity that seemed almost regal in its defiance. "She has chosen," he continued, "to follow her heart rather than the dictates of tradition, to value authenticity above gold, and to place love over legacy." The murmurs erupted again, this time louder, sharper, but Alfra's voice cut through them with the clarity of a bell. "And so I will not punish her. I will not force her to bend to the will of men who see conformity as virtue. Instead, I will honor her choice, as I will expect all of you to do." Shock flared in the eyes of the council members. This was not merely a political maneuver. It was a transformation of the very principles by which power had been measured for generations. Alfra, the Alpha King, had shown restraint not born of weakness, but of recognition. To respect the Queen's choice was not surrender. It was mastery of the self, a display of strength greater than the conquest of armies. Yet even as the words left his lips, Alfra felt the tug of doubt. Could he, the ruler of an empire built on fear, respect, and strategy, truly embrace a model of leadership rooted in love and consent? Could he allow the delicate threads of emotion and vulnerability to shape the kingdom's course, rather than the iron hand of control he had so long wielded? He turned to Adele, the tension in his posture easing slightly. "Do you understand what you've done?" he asked, his voice softer now, more intimate. "This choice. It has shifted everything. The court, the council, the very expectations of what it means to be a queen. And yet, I cannot deny the truth in your heart, nor the courage it took to speak it." Adele met his gaze steadily. "I do," she said simply. "And I do not regret it. For what is a crown if it cannot rest upon a heart that is free to love as it chooses?" Alfra's chest tightened again, but this time it was a different sensation. Less alarm, more awe. Here was a woman who had stood unshakable before him, whose loyalty was not to his authority, but to the shared integrity between them. And in her courage, he found the first stirrings of something he had never allowed himself: humility. The court continued to whisper, their opinions splintering along the fault lines of tradition and admiration. Some saw rebellion, others saw bravery. And Alfra, watching the play of light across Adele's determined features, realized that the truest power he could wield was not to bend her will, but to protect it, to honor it, and to let it guide their shared path forward. Later, alone in his private chambers, Alfra examined the complexities of the choice she had made. There would be consequences, certainly. The whispers, the questioning eyes, the subtle recalibrations of power within his court. But there was also a revelation. Leadership was not solely about enforcing obedience. It was about understanding, about navigating not just the terrain of empires, but the terrain of hearts. And in that terrain, Adele had proven herself both fearless and wise. He moved to the window and looked out over the sprawling lands, the rivers glinting like silver threads and the forests stretching endlessly toward the horizon. For decades, he had seen these lands through the lens of strategy, their value measured in wealth, loyalty, and the security of his throne. Now he saw something different: the potential for a kingdom built not only on conquest, but on authenticity, connection, and the courage to defy expectation. When Adele entered later, carrying herself with the quiet elegance that had first captivated him, Alfra did not speak at once. Instead, he watched her, noting the subtle grace in her movements, the calm certainty in her eyes, and the unmistakable aura of a woman who had chosen wisely. "You have done something extraordinary," he said finally. "Not just for yourself, but for all of us. You have shown that courage is not measured by victories in battle, but by the willingness to defy expectation for the sake of truth." Adele inclined her head slightly, a soft smile playing at her lips. "And you, my king, have shown that strength is not only in command, but in understanding, in restraint, and in the humility to honor the choices of those you love." Alfra felt a surge of emotion that was nearly unfamiliar to him. Pride, yes, but deeper than that, a sense of partnership, of mutual respect that transcended traditional hierarchies. This was not merely a political alliance or a ceremonial marriage. It was a connection forged in honesty, trust, and the audacity to place love above power. The days that followed were marked by subtle shifts. Courtiers who had doubted began to observe, some with grudging respect, others with fascination. The public, ever attuned to whispers of scandal and courage alike, took note of the queen who had chosen love over fortune. And Alfra, the Alpha King, continued his introspection, navigating the balance between authority and empathy, strategy and compassion. Through it all, one truth became increasingly clear: A true alpha was not measured by the lands he commanded, the armies he led, or the wealth he accumulated. True strength lay in the courage to respect choice, to embrace vulnerability, and to honor love as a force capable of reshaping not only hearts but kingdoms. In those quiet moments, standing beside Adele, Alfra understood the profound gravity of her decision. She had chosen love, yes, but in doing so, she had also chosen him, not as a ruler, not as a king, but as a partner. And in that choice, the foundation for a new era of leadership, a new understanding of what it meant to wield power, was laid. The court would murmur, the nobles would debate, and the kingdom would watch with bated breath. But Alfra, the Alpha King, had glimpsed a truth far more enduring than gold or title, that leadership rooted in love, respect, and mutual courage could be more formidable than any army, more enduring than any throne, and more transformative than any conquest in history. And so, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a final golden glow over the palace, the Alpha King took a quiet, resolute breath. He was no longer merely a conqueror of lands. He was a guardian of hearts, a student of courage, and a witness to a choice that would echo through the annals of their kingdom for generations. Adele's defiance had not weakened him. It had revealed him, true alpha, not in dominion, but in understanding, not in command, but in love. The halls of the palace, usually filled with measured protocol and polite murmurs, now hummed with an undercurrent of tension. Courtiers whispered behind carved screens, their voices soft yet sharp, carrying gossip like arrows aimed at the heart of convention. The kingdom, steeped in centuries of rigid tradition, had never witnessed such audacity. A queen who refused the opulence and influence offered to her, choosing love over legacy. From the tallest spire of the palace, Alfra watched the city below, his mind restless. Marketplaces, workshops, and taverns buzzed with speculation. Merchants paused in their stalls to exchange astonished glances. Mothers leaned toward their daughters, recounting the audacious tale in hushed, reverent tones. Even the soldiers patrolling the city streets murmured with curiosity, their loyalty to the crown tinged with intrigue at the queen's bold choice. "Change is in the air," Alfra muttered to himself, his jaw tight. He had anticipated resistance from the council, from advisors, from nobles, but not from the very people whose loyalty had always been presumed. Yet the waves of murmurs, the subtle energy shifting through the city, carried not fear, but fascination, and perhaps admiration. Inside the council chamber, reactions were more volatile. The advisors convened in secret, their voices rising and falling like the tide as they debated the ramifications of Adele's decision. Some decried it as reckless, a direct challenge to the foundations of monarchy. "If the queen refuses the power we offer her," one elder noble snapped, "what prevents every noblewoman henceforth from choosing her own path? The kingdom will descend into chaos." Another, younger and more perceptive, countered with quiet authority. "Or perhaps," she said, "she has revealed a deeper truth, that power derived from fear is fragile, and that true influence arises from respect and courage. The people are listening and they are learning." The debate continued long into the evening, advisors and nobles alike grappling with the unsettling realization that the queen's choice had done more than defy expectations. It had challenged the very core of the kingdom's values. Meanwhile, Adele moved with serene purpose through the palace corridors, aware of the whispered conversations and stolen glances that followed her. She no longer felt the weight of scrutiny as a burden. Instead, she carried it as proof of her own conviction. The path she had chosen was not without risk, yet it was a path paved with authenticity, one she walked with steady courage. In private, she confided in a few trusted attendants, women and men who had long served the crown with loyalty but whose hearts recognized the subtle shift unfolding. "I did not choose this path lightly," she said. "But every tradition, every expectation, can bend in service of truth. And love. Love demands honesty, even when it is inconvenient or dangerous." Her attendants nodded, inspired by her fearlessness. Their respect for her deepened, not because of titles or privilege, but because she had acted on principle, revealing a strength both human and extraordinary. The queen's influence began to ripple outward, touching those whose lives were once dictated solely by hierarchy and convention. In the city streets, the public sentiment evolved with remarkable speed. Ballads and whispered stories about the queen spread from tavern to market, from artisan to laborer. The tale of a woman who had rejected wealth and comfort for love captivated hearts. Children asked their mothers why the queen's choice mattered. Mothers whispered lessons of bravery and authenticity. Even the merchants, often preoccupied with coin and trade, paused to consider the implications of such courage. It was as if a quiet revolution had begun, not one waged with swords or banners, but with ideas and conviction. People saw in Adele a reflection of possibilities they had never dared imagine, a life unbound by convention, defined not by wealth or status, but by choice and integrity. Yet change, even the most beautiful kind, was never without friction. Some nobles grew resentful, seeing the queen's autonomy as a threat to their own influence. They whispered in shadowed corridors, sowing doubt and questioning the king's judgment. Could a ruler who tolerated such defiance maintain authority? Might other vassals test boundaries, emboldened by the queen's example? Alfred understood the risks, yet he did not waver. He had witnessed Adele's conviction firsthand, had felt the gravity of her choice, and knew that the foundation of their partnership, and of a truly enduring kingdom, lay not in coercion but in mutual respect. He convened a private audience with the council, a calculated yet bold move. The nobles entered, wary of confrontation, expecting admonishment or rebuke. Instead, Alfred spoke with measured authority, tempered by the insight born of experience and introspection. "Let me be clear," he began, his voice resonant and calm. "Adele's choice does not weaken the crown, strengthens it. Not through fear, not through obligation, but through authenticity and courage. If you cannot understand that, then perhaps it is not the crown that must be questioned, but your understanding of leadership itself." The room fell into stunned silence. Eyes widened, breaths caught. Some nobles bristled, while others, secretly inspired, recognized the wisdom in his words. For the first time, Alfred's authority was not predicated solely on tradition or fear. It was rooted in vision, in understanding, in the recognition that leadership could evolve without crumbling. Outside, the city continued to buzz. Word of the king's measured support of the queen spread quickly. For the common people, this was unprecedented. A ruler who did not demand submission, a queen who did not bow for riches, and a partnership built on respect and affection rather than convenience or ambition. The streets seemed alive with possibility, the energy of a subtle revolution swelling like a tide beneath the surface of everyday life. Even the soldiers, who had long been trained to uphold the letter of law without question, noticed the change. Their loyalty to the crown remained unwavering, yet it was now colored with admiration. They had witnessed a ruler capable of humility, a queen capable of bravery, and a kingdom witnessing a new paradigm of power, one not dictated by fear but inspired by example. Late in the evening, Alfred and Adele walked the palace gardens together, the night air cool against their skin, the stars reflecting in the still waters of the fountain. The world seemed quieter, as if listening to the unspoken acknowledgement that a shift had begun, subtle but profound. "You see it, don't you?" Adele asked softly, her fingers brushing against his. "The way the kingdom feels different. The way people are looking at us, and at what is possible." Alfred nodded, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. "Yes, see it. And it terrifies me even as it excites me. Change is unpredictable. The court will resist. Alliances may falter. But this feels right." Adele smiled, a light that seemed to illuminate even the darkest corners of his doubt. "Right is not always safe. But it is necessary. And when love guides a choice, it carries a strength no gold or army can rival. He held her hand, feeling the warmth of her courage radiating through him. For decades, he had ruled by strategy, by expectation, by the careful balancing of power. Now he understood that true leadership required something more: the humility to witness bravery without attempting to control it, the vision to see potential beyond convention, and the courage to allow love to guide both ruler and kingdom alike. As they walked beneath the moonlight, the palace walls seemed less like barriers and more like witnesses to a new era. The murmurs of revolution, quiet as they were, carried hope and inspiration. The kingdom was awakening, not through war nor decree nor wealth, but through the simple audacious act of choosing the heart over gold. And in that awakening, Alpha recognized a deeper truth. The strength of a kingdom, and of an alpha king, is measured not only by what is conquered, but by what is nurtured, honored, and set free. The night deepened, and the first whispers of a dawn unbound by convention swept through the streets. A subtle revolution had begun, led not by banners or swords, but by the quiet courage of one woman and the unwavering respect of the king who chose to see her not as a subject, but as a partner. In the days and months to come, the kingdom would grapple with this new reality. Some would resist, clinging to old ways. Others would be inspired, seeking to emulate the queen's courage and the king's restraint. And through it all, the heartbeat of a new era would pulse beneath the cobblestones, through the palace corridors, and in every heart that dared to imagine a world where love, respect, and authenticity were the ultimate currencies of power. The dawn broke over the kingdom with a pale, trembling light, touching the rooftops of the city with soft gold. It was a quiet morning, yet beneath its calm surface, the echoes of Adele's choice continued to ripple outward, touching every stone, every street, and every heart in the realm. The king had returned to his private chambers, but the lessons of the past weeks lingered with him like a stubborn shadow. Wealth and conquest were fleeting, courage and devotion endured. Alfra observed the sun rising over his city from the balcony, the air crisp with the scent of awakening life. The kingdom he had known for decades, the maps, the titles, the intricate systems of influence, suddenly seemed smaller, less vital than the lessons he had learned from a woman who refused to be bought. Adele had chosen love over riches, authenticity over convenience, and in doing so, she had laid bare a truth he had long buried beneath the weight of crowns and authority: that the strength of a kingdom was not measured in gold or armies, but in hearts aligned by trust, respect, and devotion. The council awaited him later that morning, their faces a blend of apprehension and curiosity. Some were eager to see the king assert control, to restore the kingdom to the familiar rhythm of hierarchy and fear. Others, more perceptive, sensed the change that had begun to ripple through him, a subtle but unmistakable evolution in how he saw power and leadership. Alfra's voice carried through the chamber, measured and unwavering. We have long measured strength in wealth, in conquest, in the obedience of our subjects. But these measures, they are not enough. They are fragile, subject to decay, to rebellion, to betrayal. True strength, I have come to realize, lies elsewhere. A few nobles blinked in disbelief. Others leaned forward, intrigued. Alfra continued, his eyes scanning the room, finding the balance between authority and understanding. It lies in loyalty, yes, but not coerced loyalty. It lies in respect, in admiration earned through integrity, courage, and devotion. It lies in connection, in the bonds that tie us together, not by fear or obligation, but by choice. The murmurs of the council quieted, replaced by a stillness that carried both anticipation and reflection. Alfra's words were more than a lesson. They were a declaration of a new era. The kind of power he now sought was intangible yet enduring, not built upon vaults of gold or armies at his command, but upon the hearts of those who believed in him, and in the vision he now embraced. Meanwhile, Adele moved through the palace with quiet grace, her presence a living testament to the principles she had embraced. She spent her days among the people, listening to their stories, understanding their struggles, and demonstrating a form of leadership that could not be bought or imposed. Her influence spread, subtle yet potent, challenging the notion that power required titles or possessions. In the market square, artisans whispered her name, recounting her courage with awe. Mothers told their children that the queen had chosen love over fortune, modeling bravery in the face of expectations. Even soldiers spoke of her quietly, admiring the strength that came not from wielding a sword, but from holding true to one's convictions. Alfra watched her one afternoon from a distance, marveling at the way she carried herself. He realized that the kingdom had begun to shift beneath their feet, not in rebellion or chaos, but in quiet, meaningful transformation. People were questioning old assumptions, re-evaluating what truly mattered, and finding inspiration in the queen's choice. He approached her as she paused to speak with a young merchant, her voice soft but firm, encouraging honesty and integrity. "Your presence changes everything," he said, resting a hand gently on her shoulder. Adele smiled, her eyes meeting his with that same unwavering clarity that had captured him from the beginning. "Not mine alone," she replied. "It is the courage to act on what we know to be right, the willingness to live authentically, and the openness to embrace what truly matters. Together, we are stronger than any crown or treasure." Alfra felt the weight of her words settle within him like a stone grounding his heart. He had fought countless battles, commanded armies, and navigated treacherous political waters, but nothing had demanded the depth of understanding and humility required now. To honor her choice to build a kingdom on mutual respect and shared values was a challenge far greater than any he had faced before. As the days passed, they began to implement subtle changes that reflected this new philosophy of leadership. Military campaigns were tempered with diplomacy, trade agreements considered not only for profit but for fairness, and the voices of common citizens began to carry weight in the halls of decision-making. The kingdom's strength became a reflection of its people's trust, and that trust, once earned, proved far more resilient than fear or coercion. Alfra's advisors began to notice the transformation, some grudgingly, others with admiration. The young noblewoman who had once questioned the queen's choice now approached Alfra with proposals that emphasized collaboration, innovation, and empathy. The elder nobles, initially rigid in their adherence to tradition, slowly began to understand that influence earned through integrity and respect could surpass that imposed by authority. In private, Alfra reflected on the lessons Adele had taught him. Leadership was no longer a matter of imposing will. It was about fostering trust, encouraging authenticity, and embracing the human connections that formed the invisible architecture of a resilient kingdom. Power without love, without understanding, without mutual respect, was brittle. But a kingdom built upon shared values, courage, and devotion could endure for generations. One evening, as they walked through the palace gardens beneath a sky awash with stars, Adele spoke softly. "The kingdom may still resist, still cling to old ways. But a foundation built on courage, honesty, and connection cannot be destroyed by mere tradition. It will grow, evolve, and inspire. That is the legacy we can leave." Alfra took her hand, feeling the warmth and strength radiating from her. "You've shown me a new kind of power," he said. "One that I could never have learned from conquest, gold, or command. One that begins with the heart and radiates outward." Her smile was gentle, affirming, and in that quiet moment, the palace itself seemed to breathe with possibility. They stood together, rulers of a kingdom not defined by wealth or fear, but by the courage to act with integrity and the audacity to value love over legacy. The months that followed saw the subtle yet undeniable transformation of the kingdom. Decisions were guided not solely by material gain or strategic advantage, but by the consideration of what would best serve the people and the values they collectively upheld. The citizens, once passive in their loyalty, began to engage, contribute, and believe that their voices mattered. Trust replaced fear, and the bonds between ruler and ruled strengthened in ways that no army could enforce. Alfra and Adele became a living example of this philosophy. Their partnership, grounded in mutual respect and affection, radiated through the court and into the hearts of the populace. They did not merely rule. They inspired, and in doing so, they reshaped the definition of what it meant to wield influence and lead with authority. By the time the first anniversary of Adele's decision approached, the kingdom itself had transformed. What had begun as a whisper, a subtle challenge to tradition, had grown into a movement, a recognition that true power was intangible, enduring, and rooted in shared values. Gold and title mattered less than courage, integrity, and the human connections that gave meaning to authority. Alfra, standing once more on the balcony overlooking the city, reflected on the journey they had undertaken. The lessons learned were profound. That love could reshape empires, that courage could redefine legacy, and that the strength of a kingdom lay not in wealth or conquest, but in the hearts of those who chose to act with authenticity and devotion. And Adele, moving gracefully through the palace gardens below, remained a beacon of this new era, a living testament to the idea that a queen could wield influence without a crown, that courage could outshine gold, and that the foundation of a true kingdom was built not upon riches, but upon love, respect, and enduring human connection. Together, they had discovered that the greatest victories were not won on battlefields or in treasure chambers, but in the quiet choices that defined character, forged loyalty, and inspired a kingdom to become something greater than the sum of its parts. Alfra sat alone in the dim glow of his private study, the flicker of candlelight casting long shadows across walls lined with maps, relics, and trophies of conquest. The artifacts of past victories, the weapons, banners, and records of battles won, had once given him solace, a sense of certainty. Now they felt distant, relics of a life defined by power alone. The world he had known, measured in gold, titles, and allegiance, was changing, and so, he realized, must he. Adele's choice had been the catalyst, but the transformation unfolding within him was deeply personal. He had always prided himself on being an alpha king, a master of strategy, a ruler whose authority was absolute. Yet authority without empathy, power without understanding, was hollow. Her courage had pierced his carefully constructed armor, revealing a truth he had long avoided. True strength demanded not only control but compassion, not only conquest but connection. He leaned back in his chair, fingers tracing the edge of the polished oak desk. For the first time, he allowed himself to reflect, not as a king commanding armies or dictating policy, but as a man learning to navigate a new kind of leadership. Leadership that required patience, humility, and the willingness to admit that he did not have all the answers. The days and nights that followed Adele's declaration were a relentless study in self-awareness. He began listening more, questioning old assumptions, and observing the subtleties of those around him. Council meetings, once exercises in assertion and command, became opportunities for dialogue. Advisors who had previously spoken only to please him were now encouraged to voice honest opinions, and Alfra found that the depth of insight he received was far richer than the shallow compliance he had once accepted as loyalty. Adele's presence remained a constant guide. She moved through the palace with a quiet confidence that reminded him of the power of authenticity. Her words, always measured and deliberate, lingered in his mind long after their conversations ended. "Leadership is not only about what you command," she had said one evening as they walked beneath the silver glow of the moon. "It's about how you listen, how you respond, and how you nurture trust." Alfra had taken her words to heart. Slowly, he learned to temper his instinct for control with the wisdom of restraint. He no longer sought to bend the world to his will with force or intimidation. Instead, he sought to inspire, to cultivate respect, and to lead by example. He discovered that true authority was not demonstrated through fear or expectation, but through integrity, courage, and consistency. The transformation was not instantaneous, nor without struggle. Moments of doubt arose, particularly when faced with dissent from the older, more traditional members of the court. They questioned his methods, murmured about the dangers of yielding to emotion, and warned that the kingdom could fracture if the old ways were abandoned. But Alfra, now guided by a deeper understanding of strength, met their skepticism with quiet assurance. "It is not weakness to listen," he told the council during one particularly tense meeting. "It is strength. Strength to adapt, to understand, and to act with foresight. A ruler who fears empathy cannot hope to endure." Some nobles bristled, their pride wounded, but others leaned forward, captivated by a vision of leadership that was as daring as it was radical. They began to see that Alpha's evolution was not a concession, but an expansion, an embodiment of the Alpha archetype in its most complete form, decisive yet compassionate, commanding yet understanding, fearless yet thoughtful. Even the citizens of the kingdom sensed the change. Word spread of a king who valued courage and honesty above mere tradition, who recognized that influence was earned through respect rather than enforced through fear. Marketplaces, taverns, and streets hummed with quiet admiration. The kingdom was no longer simply obeying its rulers. It was beginning to believe in them. Alfra's relationship with Adele deepened in this evolving context. Their partnership became a model of balanced power, mutual respect, and unspoken understanding. He found himself increasingly attuned to her perspective, valuing her counsel not merely as a queen, but as an equal, a confidant, and a moral compass. One afternoon, they walked together along the palace ramparts, the wind tugging at their cloaks and carrying the scent of the nearby forests. Adele's eyes, ever steady, met his with quiet assurance. "You've changed," she observed. "Not because I forced you, but because you allowed yourself to see another way, a stronger, more enduring way." Alfra smiled, the weight of years and experience softened by a sense of renewal. "I had been strong in many ways," he admitted. "But I see now that true strength is not only measured by victories or dominion. It is measured by the courage to respect others, to adapt, and to embrace the unknown with integrity." Her hand found his warm and steady. "And in doing so, you have become the Alpha King the kingdom truly needs. One who inspires loyalty, respect, and courage, not by fear but by example." The words resonated deeply within him. Alpha realized that leadership, like love, required vulnerability, patience, and trust. To be an alpha was not to dominate, but to nurture, to protect, and to elevate those around him. He understood that his legacy would not be carved solely from battles won or empires expanded, but from the hearts he had touched, the lives he had elevated, and the culture of respect and authenticity he had fostered. As weeks turned into months, Alfra implemented reforms that reflected his evolving understanding of power. Advisors were encouraged to propose innovative solutions without fear of reprimand. Citizens were granted greater agency in local governance, fostering a sense of shared responsibility and pride. Even the military, long disciplined by strict command, was guided to act with integrity and ethical consideration, reflecting the principles he now held as central to his reign. Adele remained at his side, not as a subordinate, but as a partner in every sense. Their bond, forged in courage and trust, became a symbol to the kingdom of the kind of leadership that was possible when love, respect, and vision were intertwined. Together, they embodied a dynamic power that was at once inspiring and human, a reminder that an alpha's true strength lay not in domination, but in the ability to transform, to listen, and to lead with heart. Alfra often reflected in quiet moments how far he had come. The lessons Adele imparted, the challenges he faced, and the choices they both made had reshaped him. The Alpha King who had once believed power was absolute now understood that it was relational, ethical, and enduring only when exercised with wisdom and empathy. One evening, as the first snow dusted the palace grounds in silver, Alfra stood with Adele at the edge of the gardens. The world felt still, yet beneath the hush of winter, he sensed the kingdom itself awakening to the promise of something new. a reign defined not by fear or fortune, but by courage, authenticity, and enduring love. "You are no longer just the king," Adele said softly. "You are the leader the kingdom needs. A true alpha, strong, compassionate, and wise." He took her hand, the warmth of her presence grounding him. "And you," he replied, voice tender, "are the heart that taught me how to lead, not through fear but through love." Together, they looked out over the lands they had sworn to serve, a kingdom poised on the brink of transformation. Alfra understood that evolution was not a destination but a journey, and that the most profound victories were those that nurtured others, respected choice, and inspired hearts. In the quiet glow of twilight, the Alpha King embraced a new definition of power, one that was measured not in gold, armies, or conquests, but in courage, empathy, and the unwavering capacity to love and lead with integrity. Adele's influence had reshaped him, and through their partnership, the kingdom itself began to reflect a vision of enduring human-centered leadership. The Alpha King had evolved. The true test of his strength, the essence of his legacy, would not be found in chronicles of conquest, but in the hearts of those he had chosen to protect, uplift, and inspire. The palace, long a bastion of formality and hierarchy, had begun to hum with a different rhythm. Where once its corridors echoed only with the commands of those in power, now there was conversation, laughter, and debate, a living testament to the subtle yet profound influence of the queen who had chosen love over fortune. Adele moved through these halls with a quiet authority, her presence commanding not through titles or fear, but through the strength of character and clarity of purpose. Though she had declined the trappings of traditional power, her influence was undeniable. Advisors, nobles, and even the citizens of the kingdom began to recognize that leadership could take many forms, and that true authority often came from the ability to inspire, guide, and nurture rather than to dictate. Adele embodied this principle. She did not sit upon the throne, yet every decision, every conversation, and every initiative she undertook shaped the kingdom in profound ways. She began by establishing councils that included not only nobles but also artisans, merchants, and scholars, ensuring that diverse voices contributed to the governance of the realm. Where previously decisions had been made in isolation, now perspectives from every walk of life were considered. The effect was transformative. Policies became more practical, fairer, and more aligned with the true needs of the people. One afternoon, Adele entered the great hall where a discussion on resource distribution was underway. The room fell silent as she spoke, her voice calm but firm. "A kingdom is measured not by the wealth of its treasury, but by the well-being of its people. We cannot claim to be strong if the foundations of our society, our artisans, our merchants, our laborers, are neglected." Her words resonated, sparking conversations that had long been stifled. Nobles who had once relied solely on inherited privilege now found themselves challenged to think beyond tradition. Slowly, they began to adapt, recognizing that the queen's influence was not a threat to their authority but a guiding force for a stronger, more resilient kingdom. Beyond policy, Adele's influence was profoundly human. She visited hospitals, workshops, and schools, listening to the concerns of the people with genuine empathy. She did not offer platitudes or ceremonial gestures. She acted, often quietly, to implement changes that improved lives. Her presence reassured the populace that their voices mattered, that their struggles were seen, and that their well-being was valued above pomp and ceremony. In the royal gardens, she met with a group of young women aspiring to positions of leadership. "You do not need a crown to make a difference," Adele told them. "Influence begins with conviction, courage, and the willingness to act with integrity. Leadership is not inherited. It is earned through choice, dedication, and the impact you leave on others." The women left the gardens inspired, carrying her words like a torch. Across the kingdom, similar conversations sparked quietly in homes, markets, and guilds. The queen's example challenged the entrenched belief that authority was bound by wealth and title. Instead, she illuminated a path where influence was measured by integrity, courage, and the ability to inspire others. Even within the palace, her unconventional power shifted dynamics. The courtiers and advisors, initially wary of her non-traditional role, began to recognize the wisdom of her counsel. Decisions that once depended solely on Alfra's judgment were now enriched by her insights. The Alpha King, whose authority remained unquestioned, welcomed her perspectives, understanding that collaboration strengthened rather than diminished his reign. One evening, Alfra found Adele walking along the palace balcony, gazing at the city below. The streets were alive with energy, the citizens moving with a quiet confidence that mirrored the kingdom's evolving spirit. He approached her, his presence soft but grounding. "You've changed everything," he said quietly. "Not through orders or edicts, but through the power of your example. People are beginning to see that influence is not given. It is demonstrated, earned, and felt." Adele turned to him, her expression serene. "Influence is a reflection of trust, respect, and the courage to act on principle," she replied. "I do not need a crown to lead. I need only conviction and a willingness to serve others. That, in turn, strengthens your reign as much as it strengthens the kingdom." Alfra smiled, a deep sense of admiration swelling in his chest. He understood now that her approach was complementary to his own. Where he commanded authority through strategy, vision, and decisiveness, she wove a network of trust, empathy, and inspiration that permeated every layer of society. Together, they formed a dynamic partnership that was at once powerful and profoundly human. The Queen's influence extended beyond governance into culture and social norms. She encouraged education for all children, regardless of class, and fostered artistic expression as a means of reflection and growth. Guilds and workshops flourished under her guidance, as artisans and laborers found both respect and recognition for their contributions. The kingdom's identity began to shift subtly yet unmistakably, from one defined by hierarchy and wealth to one defined by community, integrity, and shared purpose. Adele's courage inspired others to act. Young leaders emerged, motivated not by the desire for titles or riches, but by the example of a woman who had chosen love and authenticity over convenience. Families embraced dialogue and empathy, and even the older generation of nobles began to reconsider their assumptions, learning that influence was not zero-sum, that empowering others did not diminish their own value, but rather enriched the entire realm. One day, a messenger arrived with a report from the farthest reaches of the kingdom. Villages that had previously felt isolated and neglected were now thriving. Citizens spoke openly of initiatives inspired by the Queen's example, taking responsibility for their communities, and fostering bonds of trust and collaboration. The seeds Adele had sown were growing, quietly but relentlessly, transforming not only the kingdom's structure but its very spirit. In the quiet moments, Alfra often watched her interact with the people, amazed at the subtle yet undeniable force of her presence. She commanded attention not through intimidation or wealth, but through authenticity, empathy, and unwavering conviction. The lessons she imparted extended far beyond the walls of the palace, shaping a kingdom that valued courage, love, and integrity above all else. Adele's reign without a crown became a powerful symbol, a living reminder that authority did not require ceremonial trappings to be meaningful. Her influence was a testament to the truth that leadership at its core is about serving, inspiring, and elevating others. And in her partnership with Alfra, the Alpha King, the kingdom witnessed a harmonious balance of power and empathy, a duality that redefined what it meant to rule and to lead. As they walked together through the gardens one evening, the last rays of sunlight bathing the palace in a warm glow, Adele paused to look at him. "A kingdom is only as strong as the values it embraces," she said. "And influence is only as enduring as the integrity behind it. By choosing love and authenticity, We have shown that true power lies not in gold or title, but in the courage to act with principle. Alfra took her hand, the warmth of her conviction grounding him. You have redefined what it means to lead, he said. Not just for the people but for me. I have learned that strength is not only in command, but in partnership, respect, and trust. The city beyond the palace walls reflected this transformation. Citizens spoke openly, collaborated willingly, and carried themselves with newfound confidence. Across the kingdom, the quiet revolution initiated by Adele's courage unfolded with precision and grace, reshaping not only governance but the very heart of society. In this evolving kingdom, a queen without a crown became more powerful than any monarch who ruled solely by fear or title. Her influence transcended material wealth and hierarchy, proving that leadership grounded in authenticity, empathy, and courage could reshape the destiny of a nation. And as Alfra and Adele stood together, hand in hand, they understood that the most enduring legacy they could leave was not recorded in gold or stone, but in the hearts, minds, and spirits of the people they served. A legacy of love, courage, and influence without a crown, a kingdom transformed by the quiet but unstoppable power of authenticity. Outside the palace, the people felt this evolving alpha archetype as well. Artisans and merchants spoke openly about the reforms and initiatives inspired by the Queen's courage and the King's evolving leadership. Soldiers and guards recognized a shift in command, where discipline was guided by principle rather than fear. Even the nobility began to reframe their understanding of influence, seeing the benefits of collaboration and empathy as pillars of enduring authority. Back in the private chambers of the palace, Alfra and Adele reflected on the subtle but undeniable change that had spread through the kingdom. The quiet revolution of values, the rise of integrity, respect, and courage over mere wealth or control, was palpable. They both understood that leadership was not static. It evolved as the hearts and minds of the people evolved. The alpha archetype was no longer an ideal defined solely by strength or conquest. It was a living, breathing concept, shaped by wisdom, compassion, and the courage to act rightly. Adele's voice broke the contemplative silence. People often mistake power for dominance, forgetting that influence is most enduring when it inspires rather than intimidates. You've embraced that, Alfra. You've shown the kingdom and yourself that the true alpha leads with heart as much as with mind. Alfra took her hand, the warmth grounding him in the certainty he now felt. And you, he replied, have shown that courage, integrity, and authenticity are more powerful than any crown or treasury. Together we've begun to redefine what leadership and love truly mean. In the weeks that followed, they reinforced this philosophy throughout the kingdom. Policies emphasized fairness and inclusion. Education and civic engagement were prioritized. Citizens were empowered to take part in shaping their communities. The message was clear. Strength and leadership were inseparable from empathy and integrity. Even in distant villages, word spread of a king and queen who led not with fear, but with courage and principle. They became legends in their own time, not because they wielded power indiscriminately, but because they demonstrated that true authority stems from the respect and trust one earns through action, vision, and heart. Alfra realized that this was only the beginning. The evolution of the alpha archetype would continue, shaped by every decision, every act of integrity, and every moment of courage displayed by those who followed their example. And Adele, with her quiet yet unyielding influence, remained at the center, not as a ruler in the traditional sense, but as a guiding force whose principles ensured that the kingdom's foundation would endure for generations. One evening, standing on the palace balcony once more, Alfra looked out over the city, the glow of lanterns reflecting in the river below. He felt a profound sense of peace, tempered by the weight of responsibility. The alpha king he had been, fearless, commanding, and solitary, had evolved into an alpha of a different kind, one who measured strength not by dominion, but by integrity, courage, and the bonds he nurtured. Adele joined him, silent but ever present. They stood together, hand in hand, watching the kingdom thrive. The alpha archetype had been redefined in their time, proving that what truly mattered was not wealth, fear, or conquest, but love, respect, courage, and the unwavering commitment to act rightly, even when it was difficult. "Perhaps," Alpha murmured, "this is the most difficult test of all. To lead with heart, to wield influence responsibly, and to ensure that our actions inspire, rather than intimidate." Adele squeezed his hand, a gesture of shared understanding. "It is difficult," she agreed, "but it is also enduring. And in that endurance lies true power." In the quiet glow of twilight, the Alpha King and the Queen without a crown understood the essence of their legacy. They were leaders not because of titles, crowns, or armies, but because they had chosen to lead with heart, integrity, and courage. The kingdom, now awake to a higher standard of leadership, reflected their choices, embodying the principles of a true alpha in every street, in every household, and in every life touched by their vision. And in that shared understanding, they realized that the most enduring power was not the one wielded from above, but the one cultivated from within, reflected outward through love, respect, and the courage to define what truly matters. The sun rose over the kingdom, spilling light across streets that now thrummed with vitality, hope, and quiet confidence. The transformation that had begun with a single courageous choice, the choice of a queen to value love over wealth, and of a king to redefine strength, had now begun to shape every corner of the realm. The palace, once a monument to hierarchy and rigid tradition, had become a living center of connection, collaboration, and inspiration. Alfra walked through the grand hall, his eyes noting the subtle changes that had taken root. Council chambers filled with representatives from all walks of life, young apprentices debating alongside seasoned nobles, citizens invited to contribute to policy discussions. The kingdom had become more than a territory ruled by decrees. It had become a community shaped by shared purpose, respect, and genuine engagement. It was Adele's influence, however, that had become the invisible yet powerful force driving this transformation. She had not claimed a throne, yet her leadership was undeniable. Where she moved, people listened, not out of fear but out of trust and admiration. Her courage had inspired countless others to act with integrity, compassion, and bravery, creating a ripple effect that no decree or edict could have achieved alone. Alfra paused by the window overlooking the city. Children ran through the streets, artisans worked diligently in their shops, and merchants conducted trade with fairness and pride. The air was filled not with whispers of dissent or tension, but with conversation, laughter, and the quiet hum of purpose. This was the living legacy of love, of courage, and of leadership that had chosen connection over control. In the council chamber, Adele addressed a group of advisors, her voice calm yet resolute. "The strength of a kingdom," she said, "is not measured by the size of its armies or the weight of its treasury. It is measured by the courage, integrity, and compassion of those who live within it. Every act of honesty, every choice to support one another, and every moment of courage builds a foundation that no external threat can shake." The advisors listened intently, their expressions a mixture of awe and realization. What had once been a kingdom driven by fear and hierarchy was now a society increasingly guided by shared values and authentic engagement. Decisions were made with consideration for the greater good, and citizens felt their voices mattered. A radical departure from the past, yet one that promised enduring strength. Beyond governance, Adele's influence had reshaped social norms and cultural expectations. Women were encouraged to take on leadership roles, regardless of lineage. Education became accessible to all, empowering the next generation to think critically and act courageously. Artisans and laborers found recognition and respect, their contributions celebrated rather than overlooked. The kingdom had become a place where authenticity, courage, and compassion were not just ideals, but living, breathing realities. Alfra often walked among the citizens, observing the quiet transformations taking place. The soldiers, once disciplined solely by fear of punishment, now acted with honor and integrity, understanding that their loyalty to the kingdom was reinforced by trust, not coercion. Merchants treated customers with fairness, knowing that respect and honesty would yield more lasting success than exploitation. Families taught their children that courage, empathy, and love were the true measures of worth. One evening, as Alfra and Adele strolled through the palace gardens, the queen spoke softly. "Our choices have done more than alter policy or influence decisions," she said. "They have shifted the very soul of this kingdom. People no longer act out of obligation or fear. They act out of understanding, respect, and shared purpose. That is the truest legacy we can leave." Alfra nodded, his gaze sweeping across the gardens where lanterns glowed softly, illuminating couples, children, and citizens gathering in quiet conversation. "This is what I feared I could never achieve," he admitted. "Not through conquest, not through wealth, not through power. But now I see that the most enduring strength comes from love, integrity, and the courage to lead with heart." Their shared vision had also inspired the next generation of leaders. Young nobles and apprentices, once focused on titles and wealth, now sought to emulate the example set by Adele and Alfra. They learned that leadership was not about asserting dominance, but about listening, understanding, and inspiring others to act with courage and integrity. Mentorship became a cornerstone of governance, ensuring that values and principles would endure beyond a single reign. Even distant regions of the kingdom reflected this transformation. Villages that had once felt neglected now thrived under initiatives inspired by the Queen's example. Citizens collaborated on projects, supported one another, and embraced education and skill development. Trust replaced fear, and communities flourished as interdependence became a source of strength rather than vulnerability. Alfra observed all of this with a profound sense of fulfillment. The kingdom he had inherited, once bound by rigid hierarchy and the pursuit of power, was now alive with connection, purpose, and human dignity. The lessons he had learned through Adele's courage, the value of love, empathy, and integrity, had transformed not only him, but the very foundation of the realm. One night, in the quiet of the palace library, Adele reflected aloud. "We have created something more enduring than gold, more lasting than armies," she said. "A kingdom built on respect, courage, and love. This is the legacy that will outlive us both, shaping generations to come." Alfred joined her, placing a hand gently on hers. "And it began with a single choice," he said. "A choice to embrace love over convenience, courage over tradition. That choice has redefined everything, not just for us, but for every life in this kingdom." As the years passed, the influence of their choices became legend. Stories of the queen who chose love and the king who redefined strength spread far and wide, inspiring other rulers and citizens alike. The kingdom itself became a model of human-centered leadership, demonstrating that power wielded with integrity and empathy was more enduring and resilient than power enforced through fear or coercion. Even within the palace, the changes endured. Advisors continued to act with insight and wisdom, citizens remained engaged and empowered, and the young generation of leaders carried forward the principles of courage, love, and integrity. Alfra and Adele's partnership, rooted in respect and shared purpose, remained a guiding light, reminding everyone that the truest strength of a kingdom, and of any leader, was measured not by wealth, title, or fear, but by the lives touched, the courage inspired, and the love that endured. In quiet moments, Alfra often reflected on the transformation of the kingdom, understanding that the greatest victories were not fought on battlefields or won through wealth, but achieved in hearts and minds. Adele's influence had reshaped the very foundation of society, proving that leadership could be compassionate, courageous, and enduring. And as they walked together through the bustling streets, the lanterns casting golden light across smiling faces, Alfra and Adele understood the profound truth they had discovered. A kingdom built on love, integrity, and mutual respect was unshakable. Its people thrived, not out of fear or obligation, but because they believed in one another and in the vision of leaders who had chosen heart over convenience. The legacy of love was now embedded in the kingdom's very fabric. It would shape future rulers, inspire citizens, and endure far beyond the lifetimes of those who had dared to lead with courage and authenticity. Alfra and Adele's story had become more than a tale of personal choice. It had become a living testament to the power of love, integrity, and the courage to redefine what truly matters. The Alpha King and the Queen without a crown had achieved something greater than conquest or gold. They had created a kingdom that thrived on human connection, mutual respect, and shared purpose. A kingdom transformed by the quiet, profound, and enduring power of love. The night sky stretched over the kingdom like an endless canvas, stars scattered like shards of silver reflecting the quiet resilience of the realm below. Within the palace, Alfra and Adele stood side by side on the balcony, their hands intertwined, gazing over the city they had chosen to lead with courage, heart, and integrity. The streets were alive with a soft murmur of nightly routines. Children laughing, merchants closing their stalls, citizens sharing stories under the lamplight. It was a living testament to the enduring transformation they had fostered together. Alfra breathed deeply, feeling the weight of decades and the magnitude of what they had accomplished. He had once believed that leadership was measured in conquest, wealth, and fear. Yet now, standing beside Adele, he realized that the ultimate measure of an Alpha King, and of any leader, was far more profound. It was in the lives uplifted, the courage inspired, and the bonds forged through respect, empathy, and love. "This," he murmured, eyes tracing the soft glow of lanterns across the city, "is the reward for choosing the path we did. Not power, not riches, but connection, trust, loyalty born from respect rather than fear." Adele's hand tightened gently on his. "And it is a reminder," she said softly, "that the ultimate test of a leader, or of any of us, is ongoing. Every day presents choices between convenience and courage, wealth and love, safety and integrity. It is not a single moment, but a lifelong journey." Alfra nodded, feeling the truth of her words settle deep within him. The kingdom was no longer defined solely by tradition or hierarchy. It was defined by the values that had become inseparable from their reign: authenticity, empathy, courage, and love. Citizens acted with understanding, leaders with integrity, and the bonds between ruler and people were rooted in mutual respect. This was a legacy that would endure beyond their lifetimes, a living embodiment of the lessons they had learned together. In the quiet hours that followed, Alfra reflected on the choice that had ignited this transformation. Adele had declined unimaginable wealth, status, and security to choose love, authenticity, and connection. That choice had not only reshaped the course of their lives, but it had reshaped the kingdom itself. It had proven that courage could triumph over convention, that authenticity could outshine tradition, and that love was a force more enduring than gold or title. Adele spoke again, her voice steady and contemplative. "We often measure success in what we acquire: wealth, influence, recognition, but the truest riches are intangible. They are found in courage, in trust, in loyalty, and in the bonds we cultivate. Every act of integrity, every choice to act with compassion, builds a legacy that endures far beyond material gain." Alfra absorbed her words, understanding that the ultimate test they had faced, the choice between love and legacy, heart and convenience, was not unique to them. It was a universal challenge, faced by every leader, every person in every age. The courage to prioritize what truly matters, to act in accordance with principle rather than expectation, was the measure of enduring strength. Together, they had become living examples of this truth. Their partnership was grounded in mutual respect, shared purpose, and unwavering devotion. Alfra's evolution from a ruler defined by command and conquest to one who led with empathy, courage, and wisdom reflected the possibility of transformation inherent in all of humanity. Adele's choice demonstrated that authenticity and love were forces that could reshape not only lives, but entire societies. Beyond the palace, the kingdom had embraced these values. Communities were vibrant, citizens engaged, and governance guided by integrity and fairness. Education, art, and civic responsibility flourished. Even those who had once resisted change now recognized that leadership rooted in love and respect created a stronger, more resilient society than any rule enforced through fear or wealth. As the moon rose, casting its silver glow over the kingdom, Alfra and Adele stood in silence, contemplating the journey that had brought them to this moment. The ultimate test of an alpha, whether in love, leadership, or life, was not in what one could seize, but in what one could inspire. It was not measured by conquest or possession, but by the courage to act rightly, the integrity to honor one's principles, and the capacity to nurture genuine connection. A gentle breeze stirred the air, carrying with it the faint scent of blossoms and the distant laughter of children. It reminded them that every moment of choice, every decision to act with courage, had consequences far beyond what they could see. The kingdom, transformed by love and integrity, was living proof of the power of that principle. Alfra turned to Adele, his expression a mixture of awe and gratitude. "Our test did not end when you made your choice," he said quietly. "It continues every day, in every decision, every interaction, every challenge. And yet I see now that the path we chose was never just about us. It was about shaping something far greater than ourselves. About creating a legacy that truly matters." Adele smiled, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. "And that is the lesson for all who listen. Courage, love, and integrity are never wasted. They are the true riches. They are the foundation of enduring strength. The ultimate test is not over. It continues in every heart, in every life, in every choice we make. But the courage to face it, to act with conviction, is what defines us." Alfra held her hand tightly, feeling the warmth and certainty of shared purpose. "Then let us continue to lead by example, to show the kingdom and the world that strength is measured not in gold, armies, or fear, but in courage, love, and the bonds we nurture." The city below seemed to shimmer in agreement, as though the very kingdom itself was breathing in the truth of their words. Lanterns flickered, casting a soft glow over streets alive with life, collaboration, and hope. The people, citizens and leaders alike, had internalized the lessons of courage and authenticity, and their actions reflected a new understanding of what it meant to live and lead with heart. And in the quiet of the night, Alfra and Adele understood that the ultimate test, the choice between what is easy and what is right, between comfort and courage, was eternal. Every generation would face it in its own way. But they had proven that it could be met, and that the rewards of acting with love, integrity, and authenticity were far greater than any material possession or superficial legacy. Alfra looked up at the stars, a sense of profound peace settling over him. "We have passed the test, not by avoiding challenges, but by facing them together. And our kingdom reflects the truth we have learned, that love, courage, and integrity endure far beyond wealth, fear, or convention." Adele rested her head gently on his shoulder, and together they watched over the kingdom, a realm transformed by the quiet power of choice, the courage to embrace what truly matters, and the enduring force of love. The ultimate test of an alpha, of a leader, and of every human heart endures. But it is not impossible. It is a challenge that defines character, shapes destiny, and inspires others to act with courage, integrity, and love. The true riches of life are found not in what one possesses, but in the connections forged, the courage exercised, and the love freely given. And so, beneath the silver glow of the moon, Alfra and Adele stood together, Alpha and Queen, partners in courage, love, and transformation, reminding the kingdom and all who would listen that the ultimate test is eternal, but the rewards of passing it are infinite.